meets world. Boy meets world. When this boy meets world.
What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Brown Meets World.
When this bro meets world.
Your boy meets world fun cast. This is episode 108. I'm Ceej.
I am Tony Curtis.
All right. Nice to hear from you again, Tony.
Always good to hear from you, Ceej.
How you been? How has things been?
Well, we're getting into the holiday season.
That we are.
Me and you've kind of been discussing, typically we get drowned with a lot of work at the beginning of December, right before our bosses go on their elaborate 2 to 3 week vacation. So that's kind of where we are now. But I'm excited. I just got my tree. And so yeah, I'm getting into the festive spirit. How have you been getting into it?
I'm actually it's weird. I've been in the spirit, although I haven't really done anything for it just yet. But I'm just I'm ready to be jolly. I was saying I need some comfort and joy. So
well, speaking of comfort and joy.
Yes. Oh, talk about a segue.
I have to say, typically, and from time to time, we've been doing this podcast since 2017. Mm-hmm. We've been doing this for a while. Me and you have been known to, on occasion, sip a little something.
I was actually looking to sip a little
something. Boy Meets World, but I want you to know that I remained purposefully sober for this episode because it felt in line with what the episode tried to be
asked
about.
For. So I will say I did not intentionally come sober, but I will join you in sobriety for this episode. Because for those of you who don't know, this is one of the infamous drinking alcohol after school special episodes.
This was a very special episode. We haven't had a true very special episode, I want to say, since season 4 with that girl who was getting beaten up by her dad.
Yeah, I think that's the last one.
But I have to say, as far as very special episodes go, this one really is a good one. And a lot of people are probably unfamiliar with this episode because this was one of the episodes that Disney Channel chose not to run in syndication. Disney was like, yo, you could do this shit at 9 o'clock on a Friday on the ABC, but you cannot do this at 3 p.m. on Disney Channel. So a few episodes are omitted from the Disney syndication, and this one is I think the first one we've come across.
Absolutely excited to talk about this episode. You want to just get into it?
Yeah. Let's just jump right in.
Okay, so you're gonna give me tell me about it.
Oh yeah, I got the tell me about it. I got one locked and loaded. Okay. Here we go. Tell us about it. Oh, the boys are getting drunk. Cory's feeling out of luck, and Shawn is drinking like he don't give a fuck.
Ooh, that was a really, really good. I'm excited to talk about this episode because there were a lot of things that anyway, going into tell me about it. This is season 5, episode 18. If you can't be with the one you love. Depressed by his heartbreak, with Topanga, Cory gets a reputation of being a downer, which he tries to shake off by drinking and partying. When Shawn catches Cory in the act, he convinces Shawn to try it as well, with disastrous results. In addition, Shawn discovers why Jack's mother left their father. This was 3 plots in one. Again, I think it's weird because in a TV show where you have 25 episodes, this makes sense for a story arc, for a 3-parter. You know what I mean? This would have made so much sense being sprawled over a few episodes, finding out some things, but they condense it into one, and it's weird because I feel like that's what we would do now with less episodes.
I do feel that one of my first impressions was feeling like things were left unresolved completely. I don't know. I'm sure we'll get to the Angela moment because I have a lot of opinions about it. But to your point, like this did feel like one of those unfortunate Boy Meets World moments where they kind of jammed something into 25 minutes that would have been nicer at like 35 minutes, like
Yeah, to explore and give it some
40
time to
minutes.
breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, so it's so funny. All right, so let's just get right into it. As I said, in this episode, it like even in the Tell Me About It, I kind of summarized. Cory gets into like this little depressive mode. He is, broken
Whoa,
up with
whoa.
Topanga.
Let's be clear. Cory is, and for all intents and purposes, is depressed in a way that depression in the 90s, just like I think I just want to just focus in on this for just 1 second, because if ever there were like a show to be like, hey, how did people handle mental health in the 90s? This was fucking it, bro. You were bumming us out.
Well, but like also, I think there's like a few things because like I kind of understand and am on everyone else in the show's side of being like, you're bumming us out because he cheated. Like that's the thing. He's like, Shawn, why isn't she as broken up about this as I am? Because she didn't cheat. Like that she wasn't manipulating anybody. That's why she's doing okay. And she's not even doing okay. She's just like not moping around because she has nothing really to be sorry for.
That's an interesting perspective. Like you're positing that like Cory is equating this to heartbreak, but what actually it is guilt setting in that Topanga is not feeling at all.
Absolutely. And here's the thing: it's not that Topanga's not feeling it. Topanga just has no reason to like advertise it the way that Cory does. Why? Because Cory needs to set the record straight. He has to play the sad boy. And what's funny is like he's playing the sad boy and woe is me and can you believe my girlfriend broke up with me? And everyone's like, dude, we heard the story. Like you're bumming us out because you're the one who's wrong. Like
Okay, so this is interesting because I feel like I have been on both sides of this. I have been the person who has been like going through a depressive state where I'm actively trying not to bum other people out. And it's like an effort. But I've also been that kind of person on the other side of it who's been around people who have been going through a depression that you're clinically not in the state to like treat. And so you can't help them. And so it, at a certain point, is just draining of yourself. Like, so I've been on both sides of it.
Absolutely. And again, to me, it's not to say that Cory doesn't have a right to be depressed. And it's not to say that Cory doesn't need help and assistance and all these other things. It's just to say that the reaction of the people around him, which is like, dude, you're like literally bringing everyone else down. It's like, no, dude, you're being showy about this when we've all been paying attention. You know, like you were in Teen Beat last week. We all know, like the teachers are all paying attention. We understand what went down and you are just kind of playing the victim right now.
You know, it's interesting. And tell me if you felt any of this at all. I just thought it was really interesting that Cory happened to be going through a depression, but because he was going through depression, he was not invited to the celebrating the new nose party, which feels like, I don't know, there just seems like something interesting that's happening there where like one person is like trying to celebrate like a newness in a way of something that calls them a depression and actively trying not to bring around someone who is at just a different phase of it. I just thought that was interesting.
That's a very good point. I didn't think about the something newness of this party, but that does bring us to our roll call, which is Vanessa Evigan. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to say your name properly. Anyway, it is the girl who plays Kimberly, who got the new job.
Kimberly Sutton Fonda?
I have no idea. But like I will say, I was, as usual, we get the stereotypical trope of mean girl of the week. You know, like there's just, and it was like so sad to see this character be written again, who doesn't seem to care about anything except being vain and trying to hook up with dudes. Like that's how these showrunners see girls. It's like,
She is so incredibly vain that the one person she specifically told people not to invite to the party got in simply by complimenting her nose. Like, that's
Exactly.
all it took, a single compliment. By the way, I quickly want to say this. The show is constantly referencing Bridget Fonda as like her nose inspiration. I had to Google Bridget Fonda. I had no idea who that was. I don't know if that shows my age or a
Neither
lack
did
of pop
I.
culture
Didn't even
knowledge,
get it.
but
Yeah.
I did it. I didn't. I had to Google.
That's like, no, absolutely. And what did you find when you Googled?
I found an actress I was vaguely familiar with, but didn't have a nose that I thought was something that I would like. Like, you know, like if like you see a girl, she got big ass, and be like, oh, you got that J-Lo ass, is like, it makes sense. But like, I wouldn't. I wouldn't
You
think
know what?
Bridget Fonda's nose.
Whatever makes Bridget Fonda feel better about Bridget Fonda. That's
Hey,
what I'm missing.
I'm sure we have a lot of Bridget Fonda fans who listen to our podcast, and we're in no way trying to despair the name of Bridget Fonda. I just want you guys to know.
But I wanted to talk about that party a little bit because we're at Kimberly's party. And again, she is just kind of seen as like this character who's just like, yo, now that you're with Shawn, can I dance with him later? And again, it's like, A, bold. B, I do like Angela's security in her relationship. Like, you can do whatever you want to do, but he ain't going anywhere. So do you, boo.
I loved Angela throughout the entire party. I just loved her vibe of just like, you know what, girl, this is your party. I see you feeling yourself, but just don't overstep. Like, I love it.
And then she does the same thing with Cory. Cory's like becomes like this life of the party out of nowhere. Sorry. And all of a sudden, she's just like, yo, Cory's looking kind of good too. And again, it's just, I don't want to harp on this too long, but it's another iteration of the writers only seeing teenage girls as very shallow. And it's just, it always bothers me when I see it.
Whatever guy has the most attention is the one that Kimberly wants to be with. Obviously, that's how women work, right? That's how Boy Meets World has described women.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Yo,
but
Cory,
all of this, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say that I kind of, for like a hot second, thought Cory was a fun drunk, and not like I get it. Like, he's obnoxious. He peed on a cop car. We'll get into all of that, but just the Cory that's just like telling stories about him and Shawn and like making jokes about it. I was like, I'm kind of into this Cory Matthews. He seems fun.
I would like you. I should definitely just start jumping ahead of you because you always get ahead of me whenever I let you in. But either way, I was going to say this leads us to the revelation that Cory has been drinking at the party.
Yes,
so he's this one guy. Topanga comes in. He's dismissive of her. We're like, what's going on? Like, there, it's set up to be like, hey, what's going on with Cory? He's more confident than we used to, and he's kind of a jerk to Topanga. And I'm like, first of all of those are elements of Cory that are just there, but he just usually plays them down. But then they reveal that he is drinking. First of all, terrible alcohol.
Well, I was gonna ask because you really brought that to my attention. I kind of knew from watching this episode that he was gonna show up to this party drunk, but you bring up a good point that the audience doesn't get that reveal until he goes to the bathroom later. When you saw this episode, did you know that he was going to show up drunk, or did you get the reveal with the audience?
I had an inkling the moment we talked about the party and Cory's, like I was familiar with the idea of there being a party where Cory gets drunk. So when he showed up to the party in a different personality, I was like, oh, this is I'm an alcohol. What I will say is I did not expect it to switch the way that it did. And I can't wait to get into that because that is a whole other conversation. But I will say, talking about drunk Cory, it was really funny because you're right, we get to see Shawn and Cory be drunk in a way that, of course, you're not going to see in a kid's show, but it is kind of fun and it's very true to life. I was like, Ryder Strong has been drunk before by this episode because he's like doing handstands and he's
having so much fun with it. And there's a certain point where like I'm watching this Disney somewhat produced show where like the two main characters are just doing shots in the bathroom being like, why don't they sell this to kids? Like, I can see why this got on the do not syndicate list. I thought was actually truly fascinating, and this kind of plays into what you were talking about, and I'm not going to move ahead too fast. the switch between Cory's drinking to Shawn's drinking. When we are in the bathroom and Cory is revealed to have been drinking, Shawn comes in to check on him, and Shawn sees that he's drinking. Shawn's reaction isn't to freak out. Like, he doesn't chastise Cory right away. He's just like, oh, so you're drinking, weird. Like, he doesn't give his friend a hard time about it, but he's so easily peer pressured into it, which I think segues into the Shawn drinking, which again takes over the episode. So I wanted to point out that that's where I witnessed that diverging taking place from Cory's drinking to Shawn's drinking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that was my whole thing is that it was, we revealed that Cory is the one who's drinking. Shawn, we know Shawn comes from a background where people drink. We understand that he has like a little bit rougher of a childhood. And so due to that, it's kind of expected that he would be understanding. He doesn't freak out. And like, we get like this bonding moment of him laying like, I used to think I couldn't live without Topanga, but it's actually you who I can't live without, Cory talking to Shawn. And I was like, this is, again, it's not the greatest thing to show kids, but it is a true to life moment of being like, oh, even at their lowest point, Cory and Shawn are in goals. It kind of really anchors the second half because you're like, oh yeah, this is a friendship dynamic. And Shawn is there to support his friend. He's like, I don't think you should be doing what you're doing, but at the exact same time, I'm not here to judge. I'm here to be a shoulder. And I really appreciated that. And then of course we get our boys will be boys storyline of asking a stranger to buy them alcohol. That's a no. Peeing on a cop car, the audacity. And it's just this idea.
Boy Meets World essentially said fuck the police in this episode.
Absolutely.
Like, they didn't say it, but they kind of said it. There's one point that I thought was really funny that I just want to mention before we move on. With they're in the bathroom, Cory's drinking right before Shawn comes in. And he says, "Ooh, Shawn, my sidekick." And I just thought, like, oh, what a fun little meta moment to follow our, and then there was Shawn moment for him to just point out, like, oh, now this is the point of the story where my sidekick now arrives, and now we carry on with our adventures. I just thought that was interesting. Also, Cory's dancing during the party, I thought, deserves an honorable mention.
Does it? I wanted to skip over that as much as possible. I think it's so funny when you see TV shows where someone has to dance or they have to act drunk and it's just an all-white cast because it's so clear that these people don't know how to like dance or just act cool. And it's not something you really see in TV shows with people of color. Like, they're still like, they may not be hitting it, but there's still like a groove. And in white TV shows, you could just tell that someone's never been asked to dance in front of an audience before, and it's always hilarious.
Well, you could also tell that they didn't have music when they were filming it. They were like, just dance in the background, and we'll throw the music in after. No one thought, should we have like a beat or like something? No. I also want to point out real fast before we move on is that the party scene, I'm pretty certain that was just the Matthews set with the bar from Chubby's, like moved airplays. It was weird.
That's a very interesting note. I didn't even look at that, but you're great with like the sets. You actually like pay attention to sets that way.
Oh man.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So they peed on this cop car. There's a moment where they're walking drunk, and Cory says to Shawn, "I usually can't pee with another boy next to me." Yeah. Which I just thought was such an interesting thing for like the writers to be like, oh, we should have Cory say this right now, that, hey, usually I'm too shy to perform next to another man, but thanks to the alcohol, I have overcome that fear. It just seemed like such like a weird specific thing that like a writer had experience with, where he's like, oh man, I can't pee if there's other guys next to me, but when I'm drunk, I can. It was just such a weird little nugget for them to throw in of Cory's personality.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where like a flaw makes them more human. But also it's weird that for Cory and Shawn that this is the first time that it's come up. Like that, like I'm not saying that
that's true.
It's not, but like it's like if we really want to do a deep dive, it's like also, dude, you're drunk, so you're gonna pee when you have to pee. Once you've broken that seal,
Did you clock the gay panic moment where
Oh,
they're
are you
professing
kidding
love
me?
for each other and the guy comes out and he's like, hey, it's okay. My brother has also chosen an alternative lifestyle.
Of course I did. Why would I not?
Oh my gosh.
Again, it's this idea. Like, I think what's funny is I don't want. I think this whole episode is like I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because we can, but like the whole chose an alternative lifestyle and the way that it's set up. I had never even thought about that phrase in depth, but like there is so much wrong with the
Yeah.
idea of he chose an alternative lifestyle, and I don't even want to go down that road. But yes, of course, there was a little bit of gay panic because we can't have men be intimate too much without there being some sexual innuendo.
Hey, no homo, no homo, no homo. That's we get it. There's also this really funny moment right before the cops arrest him, and then we can move on after this. Cory says to Shawn, stand still, we won't get in trouble, which is a callback actually to the pirate radio episode in season 2, where they're doing the radio in the closet, in janitor's Bud's closet, and Feeney opens the door and Shawn says, don't move, maybe he can't see us. They have this understanding that if they're still, they won't be seen, and they've carried it through the show in a way that I just thought was really entertaining.
No, I love it. Again, you're great with the callbacks, and this is a really good one because yeah, I didn't think about that, but the idea of it just to me, it felt like A, white boy logic, B, boy meets world logic, C, drunk logic. You know, like all of those into one.
Oh, man.
But all right, let's get to this this is
Alan?
kind of a pivot, expected but not expected, and this idea that Alan would be so like assume so much and then also be so outright with it. Like this idea of Alan, who has known Shawn for years and knows Cory for years and knows that usually it's a dynamic duo situation, if anything, that he would just immediately go so hard in on Shawn. I do not have a kid and I don't know what it's like. So maybe I'm rushing to judgment. But the idea that he would belittle Shawn like this and just assume and then say that it was Shawn's fault, he's the bad influence without asking any other questions. Where'd you get the alcohol? How long have you been doing this? Like there are so many questions that you can ask as a parent and as a mature adult. And instead he just goes directly to blaming this child that isn't his. And immediately I was like, nope, ain't gonna happen. Not with me.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting pivot because the show, for whatever reason, is trying to put attention onto Shawn when Shawn wasn't the catalyst for any of this. Like, it was so frustrating that like Cory did something that like negatively influenced Shawn, but Shawn is getting reprimanded for negatively influencing Cory when Cory doesn't seem to. I mean, like, yeah, he gets grounded for peeing on the cop car, but as far as like his influence on Shawn, there's never any discussion on that, even though Shawn hears an earful from Alan about his negative influence on Cory. I just thought that was interesting.
Well, yeah, no, like, and that's this is what I meant by like a pivot. It's weird because the episode is set up to be like, hey, Cory needs to learn a lesson. But instead it pivots to Shawn and you're like, we never really come back to Cory needing to learn this lesson. It's now Shawn's problem. And there is something to be said about someone who has a history of alcoholism and being there for a friend and kind of getting roped in. Like all of that, all of those pieces are there. But narratively speaking, they're like, hey, Cory starts getting drunk this episode. We should really talk about that. Only we're not going to, because we all know that poor people are actually the one who are more likely to have a problem with drinking.
It felt like and I don't know if this was like a purposeful, like we're gonna do a red herring where like we're gonna make you think that the show is about this and make it about this. Simpsons does that all the time. Where Simpsons will start an episode thinking like, oh, we're about this, but actually it's about this. But this didn't feel satisfying at all. This didn't feel earned. This didn't feel like I guess I was just upset that Shawn got brought into this at all. Like, really like Cory was depressed and he started to partake in self-destructive behavior, and we didn't even get a chance to like pull that apart before we switched attention over to the poor kid who's causing trouble again. So
And yes, and that's what really. First of all, I said Alan. I love that you said the poor kid who's causing trouble, because in my notes I wrote down Alan's classism is showing. And it's like, boy, if I'm not mistaken, you're not too far from the streets yourself. So you need to chill a little bit, Alan. But then on top of which, it's this idea that the show doesn't want to tackle Cory, its golden child, having a drinking problem. Even the show puts it on Shawn. And the show's like, well, if anyone would have a drinking problem, it'd be Shawn. And it's like, first of all, no, if anyone would have been exposed and knows about the danger of alcohol, it would be Shawn. If anyone would know how to hold their liquor probably a little bit better, it would be Shawn. So the idea that you would just immediately, and you even address that it's actually Cory who deserves all of this attention. But after this point, the rest of the episode is Shawn's downward spiral. And it was just so confusing. Like even Shawn says, what was it? Maybe I'm misquoting. Someone says, "I'm not in any trouble, you are." What was that? Who's that? Do you remember? I'm sorry.
Oh, Shawn says that. Shawn said that to Cory when the Matthews are like chastising them about the drinking. Shawn eventually is like, "Hey, I appreciate the lecture, but you ain't my parents. Like, I'm not in any trouble. You're not in any trouble, Cory." Or whatever the phrase is.
The phrase was, thank you, you reminded me. It was, "I'm not in any trouble, you are." And it's like, no, that's expected of me. They literally look at me as someone who would do this. And I was like, do you ever come back from that? Do you ever come back? Like, does Shawn's relationship with Alan ever really get repaired when you know that no matter what you've done and no matter how dedicated you've been to this man's child and trying to help him out, when he sees you, he sees someone who is corrupting his golden boy, and he's just constantly waiting for you to fuck up.
Yeah. You know, I feel like if this were a longer episode or like a two-parter or something like that, like if this were a drama, perhaps we'd get some flashback of Alan having a friend that he grew up with that fucked up his life, and like his anger came out as like this like protective instinct of him growing up in an environment very similar from Shawn's and seeing kids go astray. Like I'm sure there would be something to that if it were fleshed out, but it doesn't have that. And I guess my biggest frustration is that like I just wish that this episode would have just chosen a kid and just dedicated the whole episode to him, because this whole like half a coconut for each one isn't enough story for either.
Come on. I'm here for it.
But truly, like, we've already established that Shawn's whole like foundation is built around Cory and Topanga. It would have made just as much sense for Shawn to get drunk at this party, for Shawn to like do all these things. Like it would have just made sense to just make it a Shawn drinking episode, since he's apparently predisposed.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
He apparently was set up to be an alcoholic anyway. Like this is in his genes. So
yeah, addiction. He's damn. Now you have me forgetting how to say it.
I swear we went to college, y'all.
I knew it 5 seconds ago. And my mind was like, I don't know what to say, bro. Anyway, no, like you said, I think that the half a coconut for each character definitely didn't work. We should have went all in on one or the other, and the story arc should be about one or the other.
Yeah.
But in reality, I think the story, like it would have done well to just stick with Cory. Like it makes so much sense to stick with Cory because it's Cory's heartbreak, and Cory is the one who needs to learn a lesson, and Cory is the one who needs to be taken down a notch. Cory is the one who's a jerk to Topanga in the very beginning. Like even later on, like Topanga is like, I saw you when you were drunk. I knew.
Yeah.
This isn't a revelation to me.
Yeah.
And you were an asshole. And I liked that confrontation, and that's where we should have stayed. But instead, we rope Shawn into this, and it's like, and like I said, the writers kind of do exactly what Alan did, which is that let's spend this time focused on the poor kid with a terrible upbringing and talk about addiction in that way. When again, if I'm not mistaken, isn't Alan's mom just someone who hops all over the place? Doesn't Alan's dad have some sort of history? Like we could have explored addiction in the family. Just and then have Shawn be the friend who's like, hey, I understand. I can relate.
Well, that's a great point, because when you think about it, like, yes, even if you want to pretend that Cory and Topanga's whole relationship is Shawn's foundation, and that's what causes him to become an alcoholic for an episode, like Shawn's world has been disrupted multiple times in his life. He's woken up to his parents gone. He's woken up like, oh, and now I'm living with the teacher now. Now I'm living with this person. Like he's constantly going through that. Cory has had nothing but home runs his entire life. Like this kid wouldn't know how to approach disappointment, how to approach depression. Like it would make more sense for him to fall into something like alcohol. And that would make more sense knowing that he can't navigate it when his foundation has cracks in it the way that Shawn, I would imagine, would from having the experiences that he's had.
Also, again, like just to me, Cory is the one who shows up with alcohol. So like stick with that. How about the fact that Cory just shows up with alcohol? How about we just talk about that? Like instead of blaming it on Shawn and be like, oh, do you see how like not one person goes, hey, do you see what you did to Shawn? Do you see how your destructive behavior and your like, did you even consider the fact that Shawn has a father with alcoholism? Or were you too obsessed with yourself and you roped someone into like that's another conversation that we could have. If you want to have Shawn go down this rabbit hole and start to get drunk, someone should look at Cory and be like, hey, do you see what you've done? Do you see how your destructive behavior is bleeding out into others? Like that is the way to go. But no, instead we just blame Cory.
I do want to give Cory a little bit of credit because when Alan confronts Shawn, Cory does actually own up and say, no, Dad, you got this wrong. I'm taking accountability for this. I did this. It wasn't Shawn. In a way that Cory could have easily been like, oh, Shawn's going to take this one for me. He could have just not said anything and been complicit. But he decided to speak up in a way that I feel like maybe season 3 or 4 Cory would not have.
I completely agree. But again, it goes back to it's a little weird because it goes back to what Shawn says next, which is like they have you on this pedestal, and it's this idea. Again, I feel like maybe the writers are talking about the fact that they wanted to do this, and then the studios were like, we can't have that happen. Like it just feels like the little conversation we have in the kitchen is actually the writers saying and acknowledging this is not how it should be. This is the story we want to tell, but they won't let us. So instead, we'll tell the one that we're forced to.
It's just not as interesting of a story. Like if this were Full House, do you care about DJ having a drinking problem or Kimmy having a drinking problem? DJ, obviously. Like, so why don't we dive into this central character, give him some flaws, really make him an anti-hero for just a little bit? Like,
exactly.
It would have been so much fun.
What do you mean make him an anti-hero for a little bit? I think we've established that Cory is the anti-hero in most of this.
Okay, so they have this come to Jesus moment in the Matthew's kitchen, and they're like, no more drinking, no more drinking. Then they show up in Feeney's class, and guess who's been having some AM drinks? Some mimosas pre-class. In comes Shawn with the disruptions. My favorite outburst of Shawn that I want to point out is when he tells Topanga to sit on Cory's lap.
I wrote that is, of course, my bruh moment where I was like,
what?
Excuse you?
Excuse you?
Excuse
Say what now? And this was, that just was so telling as to like, I don't know, the way that they made Shawn like drunk, but then like just blurt out these truth bombs. I really appreciate it. But the fact that he just feels this like disdain for Topanga, even though it's not Topanga's fault.
It's not Topanga's fault. Again, this is what I have a problem when we switch over to it being Shawn's problem. So many things come out, and and it's like again, I think they have this done because it can be Shawn who's this way for the audience to like forgive him. Whereas I think with Cory, it would have been a little bit harder. But the fact that he's like, let Cory sit on your lap, the fact that he pushes Angela, I
Whoa,
was like,
whoa.
yo.
ABC was not going to allow a white woman to get hit on national television. That shit got cut fast. That was set up for Angela.
Yeah. And the idea that Angela responds in the way she does, there are two things. One, it's complicated because one, Black women have been shown as strong and can take anything for too long. So the idea that Angela would actually respond in kind of a sensitive, hurt way, and she has a history with her mother, makes sense. And like I like the idea that Angela would actually react in a different way than expected and be kind of like, hey, I don't like that you drink. This kind of happens. In a way, very true to life, and it allows Black women to be vulnerable.
I don't like it. I didn't like
it.
Did not like
it. However, the idea that Angela will get pushed by a white boy that she's dating and then just retreat and be like, hey, I didn't like that.
No, honestly, like I saw that and I was just truly it's not just that Shawn's drinking kind of comes out of nowhere in the episode. It's the fact that it does lead to this kind of like really serious moment where he pushes Angela fairly hard against the wall. Yeah. None of the friends say anything about it.
Nope.
It's not really mentioned again. He doesn't even apologize for it. He just goes, I don't like it when I drink either, which is not an apology, which is not like an omission of, it's nothing. It's truly nothing. So I guess I'm just wondering, why did they have him hit her if they weren't going to go through the process of resolving it?
I think, as you said, it's because she was a prop. And they were like, oh, let's use her as an example of how bad this can get. And it's like, no, what you should use her as is an example of what happens when you go too far. Because when you there go are too consequences.
And it's a shame.
Ass beat.
It's a shame because up until the push, Angela was like, yo, whatever help you need, we could find it. She was being so supportive.
Yeah.
And she just was just way too cool, like in that moment. She didn't like, I'm waiting for Angela to advocate for herself. I think that's what I'm waiting for. Yeah, and it's just that moment hasn't come. She advocated stronger for Topanga than she did for her.
It's a hard situation because, as I said, Black women deserve the right to be vulnerable and deserve the right to be sensitive. However, it's when you choose to let them be sensitive that I'm always like, why this moment? 5 seconds ago, she was willing to beat somebody's ass over a friend. But when it's her, you're like, oh.
Your old nose your new nose is going to look like the old nose, Kimberly. Back up. But Shawn pushes her and she's like, sorry, massa, I'll get out your way. Like, I don't like it.
It's a complicated line. And I think that it could have been handled better. But also more than anything, I would have loved for that to be it for Shawn and Topanga. Like not
Shawn and
Angela. Like for her to be like, you know what? No.
Because truly, if
zip zero.
Angela has like trauma with her mom that in any way reflects like Shawn's trauma, like him hitting her wouldn't have just been he was upset thing. It would have been like, hey, he's touching on something that's triggering to me. And that just wasn't, none of that was fleshed out. It was just a push for the sake of like, he took it a little too far. And I just didn't care for it at all.
Absolutely.
One thing I just do want to say before we move on is that we kind of skipped over the moment where Jack kind of does the reveal for why Chet and his mom broke up, which I just feel like I want to spend a little bit of time on, because like up until that point we hadn't really gotten the full backstory of what happened, and so this kind of fills in some history for Jack's character, for Chet's character, because I know we were kind of discussing like, oh, like he's a year apart. So did they live? And they said they lived together at one point. Like, what's the backstory? What's the history? And I just thought it was also very interesting that Jack seems to know so much about his dad's alcoholism. Meanwhile, Sean's been living with his dad for years and hasn't experienced any of it. Is this to insinuate that Chet got clean? Because
well, I was like, I'm very curious as to and like, who knows? We're doing our deep dive in here and we're speculating, but I was like, how much would Sean actually understand? Because there's a world where Jack actually knows the difference between what's normal and what's not, and he's very aware of how bad the situation was. But I think when you're in it, there's a very big part of Sean who may not have really connected the dots, and may not just like, like Chet was like really bad with the first, but when it came to like Verna was always she was the wilder card. So Sean just was like, oh, I guess like compared to my mom, my dad's actually not that bad. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. That was, again, just speculation. But I was like, oh, and we get a third reveal? Like, what are we doing here? Like, we just went from Cory drinks to Sean drinks and it is abusive. And now all of a sudden we learned this whole backstory about Chet. It's like, you guys are doing too much.
Yeah, like they started with Cory sad with Topanga, and then they ended with the reason why Jack and Sean did not grow up together is because of alcohol. Like, it just feels like such a long leap to get from one to the other, where it's just like, either one of those stories is fine on their own. We don't need to jam it and make it a PB&J. Like, that's let's separate.
Also, let's have let's spend a little bit more time on that. How does Sean feel about this reveal? What like connecting more with Jack, making a whole, like I said earlier, this could have been a 2-parter, or it could have been like a whole, like, not season arc, but like a 3-episode situation.
Totally. And we've gotten so much bullshit stories about Jack and Sean, and like, oh, you like to go ice skating? I like to go ice skating. I don't give a shit about that. Like, let's talk about this. Talk about the thing that broke your family up. Like, why is this just an afterthought at the end of an episode about Cory?
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Absolutely.
I honestly don't really have much else to say. Sean, for whatever reason, feels the need to apologize to Alan after all of this. Cory's grounded, and Sean gives Feeney an apple and $12 to say I'm sorry. That's the end of the episode, right?
Yeah. So a few things about that. One, I do want to talk about the epilogue where Sean gives Feeney an apple, and it turns out that he took it from the basket that he gave Topanga. Which, again, why the hell's Topanga getting the basket and not Angela? Like, what are we doing?
What did he do to Topanga? Like, what? Is the basket to make up for him saying sit on Cory's lap? Because if that's the case, where is Angela's car? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
he physically assaulted his girlfriend, and we don't get anything but hey, I don't like when I'm this way either. Like, this is what I'm talking about. Where is Angela's car? Where is Angela's standing outside with a boombox and a million daisies, just being like, I'm sorry, like.
And also, Sean admits reveals to Feeney that him and Jack are going to start seeing a counselor, but he never reveals this to Angela, who's the person who definitely needs to know how behavior is going to change going forward.
Exactly. God, again, if you want to make it Sean-centric, then let's have Sean have some conversation.
Yeah.
Let's have Sean start making some amends. That's
all. Man. That was extremely frustrating of an episode, I have to say. Like, talking about it with you and unraveling unpacking it, it's very frustrating. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to say?
No. I'm good.
I think we covered our bra moments. But do you have any more?
No, I think assaulting his girlfriend and not apologizing for it takes the cake for me. Although, why don't you go sit on Cory's lap is a good contender as well.
Always a good one. And then I'm gonna just throw in there as a little flavor. We have choosing an alternative lifestyle. Again,
Yes.
very problematic sentence. Feeny taught me, what is the lesson of this episode besides white boys get away with nonsense?
I guess pass the bucket. If you get in trouble, just like, well, at least I'm not Shawn, right, Dad? Like, what is the lesson of this episode? Don't drink?
Yeah.
Don't drink is the lesson of the episode, I guess. I don't know.
I will say this. If you are underage, it is not wise to partake and then pee on a cop car. That is what I will tell you.
Yes, be of age when you pee on your cop cars, please. It's the message Boy Meets World is trying to give us.
Don't draw attention to yourself when you're doing something you're not supposed to do. That's what I will say is the takeaway.
That's a lesson Black kids learn early. They get to learn it after they pee on the cop car.
What? You know what? We're not going there. What grade are you giving this episode?
Honestly, I'm giving this like a B-. Like, I appreciate that we're continuing with the whole story arc of Cory and Topanga's breakup and how it's affecting like their circle and their community. But as we've pointed out, this episode just tried to take on more than it could handle, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was right there with you. I was giving it a B-. It's a pretty entertaining episode, even though it's all over the place. We have a lot of really key moments, I would say. But it's just all over the place. It doesn't narratively really make sense. And I kind of even want to give it a C, but I feel like for some reason I walk away not feeling as bad about the episode as I should. So I'm gonna give it a B-.
Okay.
All right. Homework.
Well,
what you got?
Homework for me? Have you gotten the chance to see Tick Tick Boom?
I have not.
All right, well, see, Tick Tick Boom's my homework. Tick Tick Boom was a musical I was not familiar with at all. It's created by Jonathan Larson, who eventually made Rent. Jonathan Larson, the creator, died right before like the night Rent premiered, so he never actually got to see it.
I didn't know right before the night. Man.
Yes. Okay, so this is what's so dope about this musical. Let me just tell you the plot of it, and then you'll understand why it's hitting so hard for me. Okay, so this is a guy who like literally spent his life trying to create the best musical in musical theater history. And then he came out with Rent that he never got to see achieve all of these accolades he always wanted. This musical is about him trying to write a musical, putting his entire like 20s, a decade into a musical that never came out. And it's all about like these questions of like, what does it mean? What does your dream mean to you if you'll never get to see it come true? Is it still worth all the effort? Is it still worth you putting your all into if you never get to see it come into anything? So like those questions are just really, really interesting. There's also this whole idea of like, I'm turning 30 and what have I done with my life? Which is a question that's kind of asked, which as someone in your 30s, you kind of like have those moments of like, all of these people have accomplished so much and I'm getting into this decade where I planned on having my dreams met and nothing's happened yet. So what does that mean for me? Like just really, really interesting questions. And God damn, Andrew Garfield surprised the hell out of me, but Vanessa Hudgens in this movie, what can't she do?
Vanessa Hudgens is in this movie?
Hudgens wowed me, bro. Vanessa Hudgens, who stars in 1, 2, and 3, the top 3 billings of Princess Switch, fucking wowed me in this movie. Like extremely talented. I just highly recommend it, and it's on Netflix and it's free. And Lin-Manuel Miranda directed it and did a fantastic job directing. What can't he do? Oh my god, the whole thing is great.
Okay, so to that point, I guess my homework will be Abbott Elementary. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh, okay. I haven't watched it yet.
the pilot just came out. If you're listening to this at the time that we drop it, the pilot just came out. They did this weird thing where like they dropped the pilot and then they're like, we'll be back in 3 weeks after winter vacation. You're like, why would you do that? But like anyway, they dropped it and it's really fun. It stars Quinta Brunson, girl from the internet. He got money.
Yeah, if you followed her career, like the fact that she has a show on the National Broadcasting Network, like it's truly just like an internet fairy tale come true. Like it's just so nice when you become fans of these people who find little pockets on the internet and they're able to expand and build fame from it. And I'm very excited to check out the show. I
will say it's entertaining. As someone who, like, my sister is a teacher, I felt that she felt very seen. I felt like they were being very truth in storytelling. And also, I've kind of said this before, but in America, sadly, television is the best way to educate our population about failed systems. And like they did it with Parks and Recs. You can do it with Veep. And so I think that this will be another one where it's like it really shines a light on just kind of like the ludicrous nature that is our education system and what we prioritize. Like without giving anything away, in the very first episode, like the very first 5 minutes, they talk about how they don't have money for supplies from the school district. However, they are building a brand new stadium like minutes away. And it's just like, they were like, we don't have money. And then they're building a brand new stadium for the hell of it, you know, like right next door. Right. So yeah, I thought that was really great. Quinta Brunson, Tyler James Williams from Everybody Hates Chris. It's a really good show.
He was also on Walking Dead as well.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. He had his face eaten off.
Oh, look at you spoiling things. But
that's what I do.
It is what I do. All right. Anything else?
No, I mean that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's all I got.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening to Brown Meets World. Remember, you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, all the places. Leave us a rating. Reach out to us on TikTok, email. You guys are always communicating with us. We always appreciate it. And you can find me on TikTok at I Am Not Your Oreo. TC is just out here doing his thing. So
living life, raw dogging life without social media.
Let him raw dog. And also, I guess we will see you guys next time. Just remember to dream,
to try,
and to do good.
Do some damn good. Do some damn good.
Do some shots, but that's not the that's not the theme of this.
I mean, if you can handle it, if you're slightly older than 21, as Alan would say, do your shots.
All right, later, bros.
Later, bruh.
When the spawn meets world.